of the Young Folklorist lecture series. For those who didn't attend our first session, let me inform you that this series, initiated and organized by the Center for Folklore Studies and Research, aims to bring together a bunch of early career researchers who have completed their doctoral projects in the past 5 years. They share with the community stories of their PhD journeys and the discoveries they made to the benefit of the newcomers to the field. Tonight, we have got among us Dr. Aratrika Bhattacharya, who is an assistant professor of sociology at St. Xavier's College, Burdwan. The doctoral thesis she wrote at Presidency University, Kolkata, dealt with the politics of the performative context of the Baul songs in Bengal and beyond. Coming from a family of musicians and with her own training in the North Indian classical vocals for 2 decades from Pandit Ajay Chakraborty, she had always been curious about the anthropology of different musical forms. This, along with her research interest in religion, religious communities, and cultural studies, led her to the Bauls of Bengal. Aratrika's tonight's lecture, entitled Songs for Sadhana, Music for Money, Baul Songs and Performative Spaces, approaches Baul Sadhana and music from a primarily performative approach. Instead of looking at the corpus of songs as an exclusive interrogation of their esoteric beliefs and practices, her deliberation will inquire the negotiations of Baul composers and performers, the audiences and their patrons through a multilocal analysis of the multitude of performative settings of Baul songs. Aratrika Di, over to you now.
Thank you, Spondita. And before I start, I would extend my heartiest gratitude to CFSR, to Folklore Studies Network, to Intaj Da. He had been my university senior right in University of Hyderabad for having me here. I would consider myself as a very young researcher in this arena because all I could study was only what I wrote in my PhD thesis. For the last 5 or 6 years, I have been working in this arena. And as my supervisor rightly says that you actually start working in your field after you submit your PhD thesis. So after you are awarded with your doctoral degree is when you actually start your research, actual research. I think Spondita had already told about the fact that my thesis was not really an explosive interrogation about the esoteric beliefs and practices of the Baul community, which my predecessors in Baul scholarship had already dealt with. So we already have a lot of literature regarding the Baul identity, the Baul practices, the esoteric beliefs of the Baul. So how my work on Baul was different, a bit different from them was, you might have had the idea from the topic today. The topic said I'm going to talk about Baul performances, or say Baul songs in performance or different performative context. But it was a very interesting. I would like to share. I will want to start with a story. How I got initiated into the Baul scholarship. I mean, why at all I got interested to work with the Bauls. It's not that I personally stay in Burdwan, and Bolpur is very near to my place. So I, as a musician, I frequent to the Olis and the Golis of Bolpur. No, it did not happen that way. A large part of my deliberation today will deal with the different context of Baul songs, where we will also explore the context of the commercial aspects of Baul songs. So actually my introduction to my field was from there. So what you do, you start with traditional and gradually you go to the commercial context, and from India you go abroad. My journey to the Baul sphere happened from abroad to India, and then from Burdwan, then to Bolpur. So here I begin. So on a freezing rainy, drab, and dull afternoon of February 2016, in the hushed sound archives of the music room in British Library, London, I really felt an inner jolly folly emotive upsurge as I chanced upon a set of DVDs and hooked the headset in the ear cups to listen to it. The DVDs stored an elaborate recording of performances of Purnodash Baul in the Rivermead Indoor Stage in the Reading Town during the year of 1995 in Berkshire, United Kingdom. Once it ended, while unplugging the headgears, I realized that throughout the last 1 hour, 60 minutes, and I think 36 seconds of the auditory journey, I imagined being in one of the akras of Joydev Mela in Kendoli village or the Posh Mela in Shantiniketan. As if all this while I could see an elevated stage, Purnodash dressed in his best patchwork robe and the saffron turban, singing euphorically, strumming his ektara, the mastery of his vocal pitch, his emotive tone, dancing along, tapping his ankle bells with the rhythm of the song. And I sat right there cherishing his performance among the ecstatic audience clapping after each song, bewildered and mesmerized. So coming from a family of musicians in Burdwan, I was aware of how Baul Shur or the melody has highly influenced so many of Rabindranath's patriotic compositions while during the Swadeshi movement. I had also experienced watching the iconic character of the Andho Baul in Tagorean drama Phalguni, where Tagore, distancing the Baul's character from the Swadeshi nostalgia, addressed the Upanishadic spirit of idealism, of the Manav Dharma, or the religion of man. In totality, the romantic imagery of a Baul in rural Bengal with an ektara in a hand and the digti around their waists, the khomoks hung around the shoulders, singing devotional and esoteric songs, and asking the rural Bengali householder for alms wasn't really unknown to my socio-cultural background. However, pitted against this backdrop, what fascinated me listening to the DVDs in London was that the English narrator and the audiences seemed to be equally ecstatic, evidenced from the sound of the hooting and the clapping after each song of Purnodash for over an hour, who had kept them glued, singing and describing the Bengali Baul songs on a Berkshire stage. Well, assuming my interest in Baul performances abroad, I would not name any of the Bauls or any of my respondents. I'll keep my talk very generic. So I just have mentioned the, I'll just mention the initials of, or say X, Y, Z people. So assuming my research interest in Baul performances abroad, LM, my closest among the music reading room inquiry desk specialists, opened me the door to an entire room of rare sound recordings by the Western musicologists and field recordists of Baul performances, both in India and in the UK. So my first set of research questions that developed at that point was, when and how did the Baul, especially the Baul performances, become this popular in the West? If Bauls share a homogeneous social identity, why do only a very few names surface on the Western performative registers? Who patronizes them to the West and why? Do all Bauls perform? Why are the other Bauls absent in the performative context? So my research journey, and not everything that I talked about here, but some of it I'll definitely touch up when I'm talking about performative contexts today. So very soon I found myself immersed in a very careful scientific analysis of the performative context of Baul songs through the archival sources available in the music room in BL. For example, the collector's items, the manuscripts, the historical memoirs, the audio documents, the microfilms, the documentaries, the live recordings of performances in rural and urban festivals around the world, and also the catalogued Baul literature materials answering to my bibliographic inquiries. So from the popular and the academic literature on Bauls, starting from those published during the colonial times to the most recent works, I developed a shared understanding of the Bauls of Bengal, who among the other things have been identified as a syncretic marginal sect, an order of religious singers, some rural adepts, a class of mystics, a tradition, a nomadic community of troubadours inhabiting West Bengal and Bangladesh, in particular in South Asia. Taking this inconsistent yet inherent fluidity and plurality of this term into consideration, scholars like John Openshaw mentioned that Baul as an analytical category mirrored the emperor who had no clothes. However, as we all know, Sudhir Chakraborty has said that as if their multiple identity mirrored their patchwork robes of many colors stitched together. So while reading Openshaw's dissertation, it helped me gain an insight into the colonial representation of the Bauls, who were never referred to as a group of people until the 1800s. And with respect to the Bhadralok discourses, Bauls were framed to be uninformed, ignorant, unsophisticated, nomadic, and disreputable non-analytic entertainers, held in a very low estimation by the respectable Hindus. But my research objective, as I said before, did not begin as a study on Baul identity, unlike my predecessors in Baul scholarship, in whose work extensive geographically focused single site ethnography was the preferred prism of understanding the corpus of Baul's identity through an exclusive interrogation of their esoteric beliefs and practices. Instead, I started by aiming to inquire the negotiations of the Baul composer, the Baul performer, the audience, and their patrons by a multi-local analysis of a multitude of performative settings of Baul songs. Well, initially, through a digital ethnography of performances while I was in London, but back in India by extensively participating, observing, and interviewing in most major rural gatherings of the Baul practitioners and performers from 2017 to 2020. Very soon, I mean, the first, when I started doing my field in 2017, the first village in Birbhum that I went to was Rupur. So there I met X, a very senior Baul in the Birbhum area. So he was the first one who initiated me upon one of our very first conversation that I remember into the differences that I never really knew existing between songs, the Baul songs or the Baul song texts, the lyrics, and those lyrics when put into performances. So songs, he said, would be only for sadhana, for prayers, for salvation, but music performance was for earning an economy of sustenance. Therefore, how a Baul song is learned from a guru and how differently it is performed during a live enactment on different performative contexts makes all the difference. The songs that are sung by the Bauls in non-performative contexts are subjected to regulations, taboos, and religious conventions. Those songs can never be sung partially, but has to be performed in its full length from beginning to the end, or it can never be interrupted in the middle. Neither the beginning lines can be sung as an ad-lib, nor can one simply begin the songs from one of the very catchy or popular phrase in the second or the third antara of the song. It is important that the singer do not use any notation script or tab consisting the written lyrics of the song when he is singing as a part of sadhana. My respondent had also told me that it is important that the Bauls memorizes all the lines of the songs he learns from his guru and remembers all of that while singing. He specifically mentioned that some songs could not just be sung at any day of the time. It had to be sung only in a certain time assigned by the guru, and such song sequence follow patterns according to their themes and succession of questions and answers. On the other hand, when such traditional compositions are framed as performance, we would see that they are less prone to fit into academic categories. Because live performances by Baul performers on different contemporary stages are never repeated identically. Thus, they are capable of adapting to different time periods instantly and are able to accommodate themselves in different socio-cultural settings. At the same time, they adjust themselves in diverse intercultural and intracultural contexts. Such songs in performance then are no more studies as a fixed text. They do not adhere to strict salvation of the Baul philosophy. So the enactment of a song are intended to reach out to the mass audience from diverse socio-cultural backgrounds according to the performative context. These performances need to have a life. What do we call as a life of a song? Alternations of the song text during the performance, variations in the tune, in the style, etc., which the performers follow in their own style while singing on the stage. Songs that they sing not for themselves, but for the audience. Now, you must have understood that much of my deliberation, both during my research, in my thesis, and when I'm talking today, would be around Baul performances. So I would want to say that what do I actually mean by a performance when I'm talking about performance in my context? So the term performance has been recruited in the work of the previous scholars that conveyed a dual sense of artistic action. What is that one? Number one is the doing of folklore and an artistic event. Artistic events as a domain of performance involve the performer, the art form, the audience, and the setting of the performance. Hence, in doing folklore and in considering the performance situation, develops the performative approach. So, Baul songs, when seen as folkloristic products, put into performance, reorients themselves from a folklore of materials to a folklore of communication. Hence, a performance-centered approach calls for the performance itself, and the linguistic features stand secondary to the nature of the performance. Baul songs in performance thus becomes a mode of communication in a particular frame. Upon employing the term performative frames, I draw upon the recognition of Bateson, who suggests that varied performances set up varied interpretive frames, defining frames as a meta-communicating device. During adopting this idea to approach the Baul informative context, the performative context, therefore, the research questions that led me to the formation of this talk is also a part of my chapter from PhD, where I had asked that what is that different kind of interpretive frames that Baul performances establish? How the Baul song in performance are to be interpreted? So the performative aspect of Baul songs calls for different degrees of the performer-audience interaction with the changing performative context. Thus, for any performative context, frames work as an inseparable setting that connect the enactment or the performance of the singing Baul with the interpretation of such performance by the audience. Traveling around, attending and observing and interacting at different formal and informal participatory gatherings of the Bauls, it was clear that the degree of formality and informality guiding the organization of such gatherings determined the different degrees of the performer and audience interaction. My work was very, very motivated by the works of Ruth Finnegan and Benjamin Crocker. So, and their framework became my tool to inspect different degrees of performance and audience interaction in Baul musical performances. So, when Ruth Finnegan studied verbal arts in performances, the study emphasized the importance of probing the different grades in which performers are separated from the members of audience for systemizing the performative dimension of the oral tradition. On the other hand, in the work of Benjamin Crocker, he used a ethnomusicological approach, which helped me in examining the different grades of relationships between the frames, the performers, the patrons, and their repertoire. So, what are the major aspects that I looked into? A frame, number one, a frame where the audience and the performer is spatially and concretely distinct. Another frame where there is a relative separation, but it is not evident during the performance. Maybe where the audience's reaction or behavior influence the development of performance in the stage. Next, a frame where despite the general separation, there is some active verbal or symbolic contribution of the audience. For example, the audience request of songs, or the choral singings from their seats with the performer on the stage, or the verbal exchange of sentiments between the two. The next frame where, despite the distinction, there is an orchestral structure of the performance, where there is an active participation by multiple participants in different roles or at different times. Much like how Baul performances happen in different akras or fairs or malas. And another frame where there is no separation at all. The performer and the audiences sit together with no real distinction between their spaces in the musical context. And another frame where there are solo performances with no detectable audience per se. Now, in the analysis of Baul song in performance, we can actually find each of these various grades in the performer and the audience interaction. However, a total separation of the two, the performer and the audience, is usually rare in terms of Baul performances. In stage performances organized by different temple or ashram committees, the separation of the performer and the audience is at its maximum degree. In such performance, the hired group of musicians perform on the elevated stage, and the audience usually sit in the front of the stage, cross-legged. The highest interaction in such setting would be the audience's conventional verbal symbols of appreciation, like bah bah or shadhu shadhu at the end of each song, or sometimes raising both their hands up in the air and shouting out loud, Joy Guru, in an euphoric way. The audience, when pleased with the performance of the hired musician on stage, can approach the singer or the musician in between or at the end of a particular song and, say, for example, pin a banknote to his or her robe with a safety pin. During such performances, it is quite common to see listeners overwhelmed with evocative verses are sung, and then they walk up to the performers on the stage and touch their feet or hug them as a sign of high regard and appreciation for the emotional response that is evoked after their performance. On the other hand, in intimate gatherings of disciples of a particular, say, revered guru, for their evening rituals, portray the interaction of the performers and audience, there's no separation, it gets blurred, and everyone sings, claps, or plays the instrument, tap their feet to keep the rhythm euphorically, etc. So how these performances are organized also follow certain degree of formality and informality. For example, some performances in renowned akhras may be planned, and some may be very spontaneous and informal. Some may be unplanned but not unexpected, like those in the Sadhu Sangos in annual fairs. The purpose of the performance has also got a very crucial role to play here. The degree of formality and informality is guided by the objectives of the organizers, where the performance is a part of, say, for example, a contracted public event, a ticketed event, a ritual occasion, an annual gathering, a ceremonial event, an impromptu event, etc. It is also worth considering if the performance is the prime focus of the occasion or simply an add-on accompanying event to the main purpose of the gathering. So, as I mentioned, my analysis of the Baul song in performances greatly benefited from the work of Benjamin Crocker, whose categorization of contemporary Baul and Fakir music performances has been particularly useful in my analysis, as it is based on a simpler model of audience and performer interactive relationship that accommodates the various performative contexts of the singing Bauls. Crocker tells us that us to consider the multifarious performative context by categorizing them into their nature that is guided by their performance settings. What are these performance settings? One, that is a ritual setting. Two, that is an informal setting. And three, that is a commercial setting. Here, participatory gatherings can be addressed to those where overflowing participation is highly aspired and remain the only goal, as that determines the success of each event. It is also true, however, that there are hardly any performances of Bauls that do not have this participatory element. Just that it in intensified collaborative contexts, the distinction between the participant and the audience dissolves, and as there remains just two categories, the participants and the potential participants. In such gatherings, in participatory gatherings, there is no fine line dividing the recreational from the spiritual, and everyone enjoys through the process of music making while carrying on their casual social interactions, and at some time collaboratively consuming tea or alcohol or weed or local cigarettes, etc. In such gatherings, consisting of the insiders, the philosophical and the spiritual content of Baul songs are highly focused, and elongated solo performances build up emotional intensity among everyone participating, and singing along is allowed. This continues. While stopping the song in between the performance, the performer puts special emphasis on a particular phrase or starts to explain its meaning, and in the effort keeps repeating the phrases with various variations and modulations of its tune. This picture is absolutely contrasted in commercial and ritual events. Though the song durations are short, crisp, and timed, sometimes not lasting more than 12 minutes, within a minimum of 7 minutes per performances. Songs are timidly sung, focusing on its broad humanitarian characteristics and playfulness in front of the outsiders, avoiding the depiction of their inner meaning, those that often specify the sexo-yogic context of such songs, inaccessible to the non-initiated audience. However, the insider-outsider systemization has been used by various other scholars, which goes in accordance with themes like the esoteric and the exoteric, or obscure and the extrinsic, chronologically following each other as successive phrases, as public and private always coexist. So linguistic strategy of such songs with complex layers of meanings ensures the double life of the songs in both kind of settings. Baul songs therefore uses a lot of metaphors, and the communicative meaning generated by them is susceptible to the audience's imagination and interpretation. The listeners often are a mix of initiated and non-initiated participants, and therefore it is necessary for the bohirango, or the external nature, and antarango, or the internal nature of the same song, to be able to communicate the dual meaning, the explicit and the mysterious, catering to all the participants without changing the language of the song in performances. The Baul songs calls them the songs of Sadhana. Both the side lives on and regale to everybody concurrently in the cultural and the regional milieu of the local community in Bengal. Therefore, it is redundant to attempt to understand the dynamics of such dubious coexistence of meanings in Baul song in performance, and rather orient it according to a conceptualization of the performative setting and the receptive communication between the performer and the audience. Thus, the three main categories, which I told, was the music performances in disciple gatherings, the music performances at wider rituals, and the music performances at commercial stage events. So in intimate gatherings where sadhu gurus assemble along with their disciples and followers, or we call it sadhu shango, intimate musical performances or ganer ashors show participatory categories of the setting. Songs performed are lengthy in nature, with explanations of the prose and the meaning of the verses are explained between the lines being sung. Doctrinal exchanges are encouraged. Also, songs follow the sequence of questions and answers between the guru and the disciples, and encourage a musical debate on simultaneous impromptu ritual thoughts. In a ritual setting, or in wider rituals, or say in annual gatherings, the Baul performances are crafted in a way so as to make sure that the selection of songs in the performance is contextual to the ritual in question. This means the performer can modify certain words during the performances that revolve around the ritual setting, and certain lines of the songs can be refrained from being sung, or can be clearly bypassed by substituting phrases and words that do not fit to the performative occasion. For example, if a Shama Sangit, when sung in a performative setting in Tarapit temple, where all the disciples and followers address God Kali as Tara, a Baul performer may substitute the word Kali for Tara in the song to fit into the sentiments of the audience of the ritual setting and make it contextual. And in number 3, in commercial contexts, the performer and the patron have separate, clear-cut roles, and the entertainment of the mass audience is the primary objective of such a setting. Pedagogic transmission of yogic contents in the song is not encouraged. Rather, the devotional cover of the mystical lyrics, its humanistic features, and the popular tunes that can make the audience hum and dance to the performance are necessitated. That is why it is crucial that the performer choose such songs from his repertoire that communicate devotional meanings to the uninitiated audience. It is also worth remembering that participation and attendance in performance do not always act as a personal response to religious practice, entertainment, choice, and leisure. Rather, it also reinforces a sense of community building among the participants that create their consolidated cultural and social identity. Spondita, can you just tell me how much time I have?
You can go on for 10 minutes maximum.
Okay, 10 minutes, great. So I'll quickly wrap up and maybe take up some other things that I have to say during the question answer session. Uh, so I had also dealt with the question of gender in my thesis, but then I would not really focus on that today. We can, if you have any question, we can take up at that point in time. So as you have understood that my thesis breaks with the constant tendency or my deliberation today also talked a lot about my thesis that broke with the constant tendency of framing the Bauls identity from inside of the community. I engaged not in a study of an exclusive interrogation to unlock the esoteric registers of a changeless, isolated, historically marginalized group, but instead four-staged Baul singers as a member of the larger rural society who are in constant negotiation with the horizontal links, with the wider world, through fairs, through local markets, through networks of religious institutions. And they indeed experience mobility generated both out of their organicity of the Baul community in the village and the larger backdrop of interdependent social relations or the social web of which they have always been a part. I have looked Baul songs not as fixed text, but ahistorized them through a performative approach, exploring the life of the song in performance, treating it as an event to be interpreted, not through its history, but through its context, its setting, its frame. Baul songs as a folklore of communication. Baul songs as a folklore of communication and not a folklore of material. Constantly negotiating and overlapping with their companions, the individuals, the venues, the patrons, the music, and the contextual identity of the song in performance. I have dealt with the songs that can be deployed to contemporary examples of genres. I have tried to locate Baul songs through an author function instead of traversing on the slippery path of individualism, authenticism, or divine relations. Throughout my deliberation, I have been extremely interested in the status of singing, of demystifying the common preconceptions about Bengali esoteric songs and their performers that are rooted in academics, shared popular imaginary, or also visual regime. I have examined how song and performances are drawn and mediated by the Baul singer composer's location in the social economy and discards its over-representations. I argue that not only in their resistance intimately tied is their resistance intimately tied up with their specific socio-economic experiences, which they often also share with their non-Baul contemporaries, but also that both their experience and their mode of resistance are themselves shifting. So my intention throughout my deliberation has been a constant effort to reinsert Bauls and their songs within a flexible socio-economic and performative framework, rather than understanding or underestimating the interactive and intercultural facet of the Bauls. I would say that I contribute to Baul studies by re-evaluating the pivotal importance of the folklore of the market against the discursive tendencies to investigate solely the folklore of the heat. And that's all from my side.
Thank you, Aratrika Dev, for such an exhaustive lecture. Um, I understand that your ethnography is very elaborate and detailed. And then the central idea of the lecture has been, as far as I understood, is to draw the distinction between songs for sadhana, as you said, and then music for performance. Whereas the first one is oriented towards the Baul performers, Baul practitioners themselves, and more philosophical in nature. The latter one depends on the context of the performance. For example, the interaction between the audience and the performer, the socio-cultural context of the audience, and then you carried the performative aspect of these uh, songs to folklore studies, and then you said how it is related to doing folklore instead of just meditating on folk materials, and doing folklore, and then what eventually becomes folklore of communication. And then you related your research to Ruth Finnegan and then Benjamin Crocker, and then analyzed Baul performances through different theories about the relationship between the audience and the performer in the light of different kinds of settings, maybe informal, ritualized, and then commercial.
Commercial.
So I understood that, I mean, just saying that Baul performances are becoming inauthentic or is getting commodified is not enough. But rather, we need to look at the context of the performance before saying anything. Like just saying it is inauthentic or we should stop doing this. We need to look at their socio-cultural context and then draw some conclusion. So I will now open the floor and invite questions from our listeners. Please. Yes, Akash, please go on.
Well, ma'am, thank you for the enlightening and enriching talk. It was a very pleasant experience for me to hear. So I just wanted to ask one thing. I think you just mentioned that you did some work on categorizing Baul songs in through or through or by the frame of the contemporary genre theories or something like that. I just I want if you can explain or elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah. So by genre, I meant the different contexts of the song. So, for example, you have Baul songs of different contexts, right? So, why? There's always a why and a context why a particular song has been composed. So, what can actually be sung in a gathering where there are participants who are initiated to the Baul tradition, and which genres of song I cannot sing there, or which genre of song would rather have a devotional cover over them when I'm singing them in a ritualistic context or in a intimate gathering or say in a ashram event or say in a public context. So the genre of the songs would keep changing. So so when I was talking about genre, I was actually hinting at the selection of songs for each of the performative frames.
Okay. Thanks. So
I
the
actually have elaborated a lot. So my thesis is available in South Ganga. I would really be happy if you read through it. I think you will get many of the answers there.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to those who have raised their hands, but then there is a question on the chat box. Ma'am, it is a wonderful lecture, very precise and informative. Can you please suggest some books on song as discourse? So you can just type the names, and or we can go to the uh, to
Books on
other
songs as discourse.
discourse.
I would like to know songs as discourse. Which kind of songs? Baul songs or folk songs in general? Then I would have to deliver another lecture what is folk, and have to talk about the politics of folk as well. I'll get back to you, Shubhodip. We can talk about this later.
Okay, so we'll ask me to raise his question.
Hi, Aratrika Di. It's a pleasure to hear you and appreciation for your very informative lecture. I'm also doing my research on ecosophies of the Baul.
Okay.
The title is Ecosophy of the Bauls, Performance, Poetics and Discourse.
Okay.
So I'm, it's a kind of technical question to uh, how to include the documentaries or that I'm shooting in the field, or the interviews, the informal interviews perhaps, because the, as you know, that Bauls do not informal setting, they do not open up that
Right.
much. So we have to, the participants, as a participant observer, we need to be there informally exchanging our questions to them in a different manner. So
Mhm.
how to include all this while writing the thesis?
See, actually, depends on what is the methodological tool you have adopted. Is it only participant observation, or is it also in-depth interviewing them? So
Yes.
I had done extensive ethnography. I had actually gone and lived with them. So the way they opened up to me, yeah, of course, I do understand. Initially, they wouldn't, but then I think. You get to know while you stay there. Also, I can personally give you some information regarding people who would be really helpful as you are doing your work. uh, I think, I mean, you asked about how to include the informal interviews
Yeah,
in your
yeah. The thing is that
thesis.
the resource person I am interviewing, and also some of the performers who
Hmm.
are academically sound in a way, like lot of performer, like in Bangladesh there's a Deborah Jannat.
Hmm.
She's very academically
Hmm.
informed practitioners, so that's not a problem. But while talking to like lot of people like Khoda Box Fakir here, and many other people, Kanai
Hmm.
Baul, or any one of them. So like informally I'm gathering some of the information, but it's not always formal. So how to include those things?
First of all, you need to filter out certain things which are not needed as references in your thesis, that are not really going to help uh, give you the data you really want. Uh, I mean, did you have a direct conversation with Khuda Bakhsh Fakir?
Yeah, a lot, with lot of them.
Lot of time. So you have those recorded, right?
Yes, audio recorded.
Audio recorded. So you can definitely use his narratives there. And
Mhm.
in your reference section, you can definitely mention that it is out of a telephonic conversation or personal communication with Khuda Bakhsh Fakir.
Mhm. So while writing the thesis body,
Mhm.
I include some of the quotes, and then I provide those things as appendix.
Mhm.
That's fine, but then I need to uh, build an archive for my research. Is it so?
Yeah, you definitely can. You can definitely do. And I think CFSR already does it. I have personally known the archives that Muhammad Intaj Ali continues, and those archives really helped me during the initial stages of my thesis as well. You can definitely create your own archive of conversations and your field recordings, the video recordings, the memoirs, the films, the documentaries, and those are the visual proofs that you carry of all the ethnography evidences that you are going to put in your thesis.
Yeah, thank you so much. Can I have your mail or contact
Yeah, yeah,
number?
you definitely can have it from Spondita.
Okay,
And
okay.
I'll also tell you to get in touch with Muhammad Intaz Ali. He'll definitely help you with the thing of archiving your.
Yeah, he has been a very
Yes, yes,
kind
yes. He is
person
going to do
guiding
that.
throughout. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Shubhankar Dotto, now please go on.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Aratrika. So, thank you so much for such a fascinating and very engaging talk. I have a question regarding something you kind of mentioned about a sort of distinction between linguistic sort of importance of the Baul song and the kind of performative dimension that you are looking at. And it also comes with a sort of distinction between historiography of the Baul song and the performance as it, like the here and now of it through an ethnographic inquiry that you have done, which is fascinating. My question in relation to that is the question of identity. Like, as you kind of mentioned that you lived with those Baul performers. While they are performing, there is a sort of distinction comes with a sort of cultural identity of the Baul performer or a historical identity of the performer and a performed identity formulation then and there as a. So sometimes a performer can call from a caste identity or other sort of identity, they can identify themselves, as well as they can also identify themselves as an artist, which is another category of it.
Mhm.
So I'm more curious to know how does the performer kind of identify themselves while they're performing? Are they call themselves as Baul artist in that self, or they more get back to a sort of communal sort of understanding of them? So if you can talk
I
about
think much of your question also deals with the ongoing dichotomy in the field where there's a sharp distinction between the shadhoks and the gayoks. And when we talk about the social identity of Bauls, the identity do not really go by their say casteist identity or where historically Baul as a social category has already been subcategorized as uh, 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 as an uninformed and unsophisticated category as a whole. So
Yeah.
my because basically work with the performers of different categories. When I talked about identity in my thesis, so the question of identity was also how this performing category in itself was not homogeneous.
Yes, true.
So in the field, there's always this dichotomical, identical uh, tags that we put on Bauls as shadhoks and as gayoks. But this gayoks or the performers are themselves not a homogeneous whole. So if you go through my thesis, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
there in South Ganga, you would see that I have done separate case studies for everyone I interacted with. So their socio-economic profile and the type of engagement they have with their performance settings actually creates their Baul identity
yeah, yeah.
that I have talked about.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, I'll get back to your thesis.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, Bikram Chaudhary writes on the chat box, my query may seem irrelevant to the topic. Ma'am, is there any archival library of Baul songs from where one can find original lyrics of a Baul? Although they are generally traditional songs, but some singer-songwriters like Bhava Pagla or Lalan Fakir, they wrote their own songs. If I intend to find out whether Purnadas Baul Shamrat wrote original songs, how can I find? Can I rely on the lyricist details of Apple Music or Ghana or YouTube?
Well, I would want to answer it in different way. So I'll first start from the last line. Can you rely on the lyrics details of Apple Music or Ghana or YouTube? So please understand, Bikram Chaudhary, that folk songs or traditional songs uh, do not still have the, I would say, the uh, opportunity of uh, having been archived with the names of the lyricist and the composer for each song. It's not there. If you find the lyric details in Apple Music or Ghana or YouTube, you then first have to share those links with me, because I did not find Apple Music or Ghana or YouTube to be a very consistent source of information for a song's lyricist or composer when I'm talking about Baul songs. Now, secondly, uh, you are talking about, generally they are generally traditional songs. I do have reservations in this very term traditional, in the term authentic, and you can actually talk about this, the politics of authenticity, when you're talking about any product of folklore. For example, you are talking about songwriters like Bhaba Pagla or Lalun Phokir. Do you even know whether the songs that we know have been written by Bhaba Pagla or Lalun Phokir are actually written by them? It's not. There are multiple of songs written by other composers who use the colophon of Bhaba Pagla or Lalun Phokir when they have published those songs. So, and regarding archives, I would request you to get in touch with Intajali. We do have archive where you get the original lyrics, not of all Baul songs, but songs that have been categorized and catalogued.
Okay, Intazda, please ask your question.
No, I don't have any question, but reply to Bikram Chaudhary's answer. See, I think there are some authentic books that you can collect from different family members. So if you are thinking of collecting Bhava Pagla's book, you just visit Bhava Pagla's place and you can get the original or authentic book from them. And even if you're looking for the book of Vijay Sarkar, then you need to visit Kajal Adhikari and you get the book. Okay. And there are some digital archive also.
Right.
There is a American Institute of something I don't remember. American Institute of Ethnomusicology, that is in Delhi. So you can visit there and get a lot of Baul songs as well. And apart from that, there is a website called Baul Archive, I think. And another one is, I don't remember exactly, but there are many sources from
Baularchive.org.
where, yeah, baularchive.com. So we can get all these authentic songs and all this old generation Bauls, because now a generation is moving forward to this new generation and there is a transition, so that is the one problem. But apart from that, lot of books are also available. We are also creating a library where also you can get certain books and some digital copies. But we are not so much, in a, we don't have that catalog and all. But we are creating that catalog. Hopefully, we'll launch it soon and get the taste of it. Thank you, Aratika. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Intaza. Yes, so CFSR can really help you, Vikram, and also I think if you plan to be a armchair folklorist, then sitting at the comforts of your home and logging into different archives websites are not really going to get you, of course, some songs and song text, but then I would always want you to go to fairs and festivals and ashram events and rituals. You see, there will be counters of ritual gatherings where they will have manuscripts and those small books in local stalls. You don't even you can't even imagine the amount of local knowledge or local songs that you get from there. I think you have to just start moving around festivals and melas.
Okay, Arijit Shaha raised his hand, so please ask your question.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. That was a wonderful talk. Uh, I'm very curious about this. You have argued that the Baul as a performative space is not homogeneous at all. Uh, what is your take, or whether how do you understand this, that would you consider the Baul as a performative space, as a gendered space? Would you consider it to be a gendered space?
So if you are talking about women performers, then I would say that within the Baul sphere, there are two categories of women. One, a category who are women and they are Bauls, and another category who are Baul Shonginis within the Baul sphere, where generally the male ascetic sings and they have a female companion. So it's not only in Baul sphere, but uh, some women Bauls or female Bauls. When I talk about female Bauls, there are certain names that flashes in your head, right? So those I would say powerful Baul performers have surpassed this gender binary that is very, very evident in the Baul sphere. It is there. Now, other way around, performative spaces and the politics of performances, whether or not they allow gender to be one of the categories in selection of performers in a particular concert, then I think you yourself have the answer, because even if it is not about performances, in say any kind of performance, if you do a ratio of men and women performers, how do you I think you already have the answer, that whether or not there is a male predominance on performative context other than female. But then this will again change according to the change of performative settings, because I talked about ritual gatherings or informal events where there is no separation between the audience and the performers. So when a group of people who are all initiated audience, there is no separation of the singer and the listener or the participant, then we do not really go by the gender binaries in such performative setting. So if you are talking about commercial context, stage, where there is a high separation of the performer and the audience, yes. If you just go by a very casual ratio of the number of women participants that we have from the Baul sphere performing to the male performers who perform, then you will get an answer that that is a gender space for sure, but not in every performative context of Baul performances. And also, if you go by their theory, you would also always see that Bauls have a very different notion about their women following Shahojiya Vaishnavism. But then the real field data gives us various data. Maybe one day, if I talk about the category of gender, I can elaborate more about it.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any question? Please raise your hands. If nobody has any question, then we can wrap up the session. So apparently, nobody has any question, and so far we have discussed so many things. I mean, I haven't seen such an engaging session before this. It's a very, very fruitful session, and so many questions are asked from different perspectives. So we can wrap it up, I think. Okay, thank you, Aratrika Di, and thanks to every participant for coming, joining, and then engaging with her through questions. I think we should wrap it up. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Spondita. Thank you, CFSR. Thank you, Intajda. Thank you, everybody.